can see. God. Is it finally over? Am I out of the abyss? Where am I? What is this place? What happened to my room? Oh. So much pain. So much torment. So much anguish. It was all so stupid. The world has to know. They need to beware the Lotus. I have to tell them. Hey guys, what's up? This is Diego here at Cinemageddon Reviews. I'm finally back, and I'm here today to continue my ongoing series of Spider-Man reviews. To be honest, I'm not sure what exactly happened last time, and I'm not sure how much time has gone by. I think I saw flashes of other universes and Evil Diego shooting another version of me with a fake gun. Again, I'm not exactly sure, but I think it's time to fill you guys in on what I've been up to while I've been gone. From what I remember, there was darkness all around me, and I headed towards the only light source I could find. I just remember seeing this TV in a black void. And while I gathered my thoughts, I kind of sat next to it so I can get some light in my eyes so I could see. And as it turns out, while I was there, I discovered there was a new Spider-Man movie that I'd never heard of before. It was a fan film called Spider-Man Lotus. And in case you can tell by the look on my face, I'm here to talk about it. Here we go. Now look, before we get started, I understand that this is a fan film. I know how hard it is to just make a movie, let alone a fan film based on such a high-profile, beloved character. It's very stressful, and there's understandably a lot of pressure on people to get it right. Because as an adaptation of one of the most popular comic book characters of all time, even the smallest misstep could lead to the most overly scathing reviews you could think of, even if the movie is, for the most part, well made. The internet can be very harsh, especially to the inexperienced, and this movie was made by a previously unknown filmmaker. I also fully understand what the intention was with Spider-Man Lotus. They wanted to portray a darker version of Spider-Man, one that we've never seen in a mainstream Hollywood movie before. Sure, we've seen little glimpses of a darker Spider-Man sprinkled into typically more lighthearted stories, but we've never seen them really dive headfirst into darker territory. So this movie actually does try to give us something new, to its credit. So to tell you the truth, I actually do feel like I should watch what I say here, because as a screenwriter myself, and as someone who has made fan fiction before, that same criticism can easily be levied against me, because starting out, it's very easy to suck at what you do. That being said, I think I speak for everyone here at Cinemageddon Reviews, and probably a majority of Spider-Man fans who have seen this movie, and a majority of Spider-Man fans in general, when I say what I'm about to say next. I normally never do this at this point in my reviews, but I do feel like it needs to be done this time. My rating for Spider-Man Lotus is 0 out of 10. Spider-Man Lotus is a horrendous failure of a fan film that thematically doesn't know what it wants to achieve, has lackluster performances, a nonsensical and lifeless screenplay, a droning, unrelenting melodramatic tone, and the worst pacing I have ever encountered in any film I've ever seen by far. It thoroughly misrepresents and misunderstands Peter Parker on a fundamental level, and for the story that it's telling, constantly undermines the characters at every step it can take. And for a fan film that boasts about how different and groundbreaking it is, can't seem to stop being so goddamn familiar, repetitive, and boring. I hate this movie. God. What just came out of me? What happened? No. Objective integrity. Gotta keep it together. Let's go again. Okay. Objective integrity. Here we go. So what is Spider-Man Lotus about? Well, according to Wikipedia, following the tragic death of his former girlfriend, seemingly caused by his own attempt to save her, Peter Parker, played by Warden Wayne, lingers in his guilt of the past, questioning whether the curse of his alter ego should be buried for good. When he's met by the news that a terminally ill child has requested to meet Spider-Man, Peter contemplates the decision to comfort him in his final days by wearing a symbolically Lotus-themed suit that's all white and has a pointed hood at the top. This is going to be harder than I thought. Uh, yeah, so all jokes aside, I need to address the elephant in the room. This movie, among many other things, has a racist lead actor and director. For those of you unaware of this movie's production and controversy, it started off as an Indiegogo campaign which became very popular following a viral proof of concept trailer posted online. It gained a lot of its early support from a Twitter group that loved Spider-Man 2 and hated Tom Holland's interpretation of the character, which is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, do you see this suit? But anticipation for the film was very quickly undercut by some racist and homophobic text messages that leaked online from the film's director and lead actor, leading to a ton of backlash and a lot of people involved in the film completely denouncing it, including the VFX team who walked off the production and the actress who played Gwen Stacy. It probably doesn't help that the one black character in the film is disguised head to toe in a shocker costume, and the guy who plays Norman Osborn was revealed to be a racist pedophile. This isn't even everything that happened. I could make an entirely separate video about all the controversies and backlash surrounding this movie. And when Spider-Man Lotus finally came out, what we got was an amalgamation of overly aggressive melodrama, some repetitive story beats, and the same story elements we've already seen in a million other Spider-Man adaptations. So why am I reviewing it despite the controversy and the low appeal? Well, the fact of the matter is that at the end of the day, this is still a Spider-Man movie. It may not be canon in any official Marvel universe, but I am bound to my station. I did, after all, review Italian Spider-Man, therefore I do acknowledge the indie Spider-Man movies. I'm the idiot that opened Pandora's box, I asked for this, and now I'm paying for it. In more ways than one.
Rispetti le donne.
Italian Spider-Man, give me strength. Setting aside the controversy and talking about the film itself, my biggest issue with the story in Spider-Man Lotus is actually twofold. This seems to be a fan film that is very aware of how beloved Spider-Man is and relies very frequently on that to tell its story, while also trying really hard to give viewers something new and fresh and unrelated, and in doing so alienates the viewers from what they're watching. Because on the one hand, you have these very exciting web-swinging sequences which you can tell were done with a lot of care and attention, especially for a fan film. There are some things here and there in these scenes that don't look that great admittedly, but the Spider-Man costume looks really good, and the action is directed and choreographed in a way that you can tell was really trying to emulate the spirit of some of our favorite Spider-Man movies, including a penis outline. Because that's what Spider-Man fans really want to see. Speaking of costume design, Green Goblin's costume sucks in this. They definitely bought that mask at, like, Party City or something right after they spent all that money on a good-looking Spider-Man suit. Jesus Christ, that thing looks fucking stupid. And then aside from the mostly polished production design, you have melodrama, and sad music, and brooding, and low lighting, and darkness. Never-ending darkness. Constant scenes one after another of characters being dicks to each other. So for a long time, it's like the filmmakers are kind of split as to what kind of story they want to tell here. Do they want this movie to be a celebration of the Spider-Man character, one that has a ton of Easter eggs and references and is meant to be a love letter to everything we love about Spider-Man? Or do they want this movie to be a satire and a deconstruction of the character and how some of his earlier comic stories maybe portrayed him as unrealistic and potentially problematic? Either route is fine on its own, but because this movie tries to do both, there's this kind of tonal clash that happens quite a few times throughout the film, and it feels kind of amateur. Now again, this is a fan film, but this is very obviously a fan film that was trying to go above and beyond all Spider-Man fan films that came before it, and above all Spider-Man movies that came before it. So the comparison has to be made because this is what they wanted. The movie opens and closes with some admittedly very nice-looking credit sequences that show comic book illustrations of old Spider-Man comics, and quite a bit of this movie revolves around a kid who's a big fan of Spider-Man and collects a lot of Spider-Man memorabilia, comic books, posters, action figures, video games. So the whole point of this is to illustrate Spider-Man's legacy and his impact on us as fans of the character. But then there's Peter Parker's internal struggle, which thematically undercuts all of that because it tries so hard to be different from everything that we've seen before. This movie's whole plot revolves around Peter grieving Gwen's death and how he feels like a failure and a fraud because of it, and for a long time Peter's beating himself up and questioning his benefit to society and what he represents as a superhero, and he starts to doubt how good he is as a person and whether or not he is actually worthy of people's praise. So are we supposed to love Spider-Man as much as we already do, or are we supposed to question him? Now, on the surface, there's nothing wrong with a melodramatic story approach like this, and the source material that this fan film draws from does give us room to take that approach. But the problem with Spider-Man Lotus is it overdoes it to the point where it doesn't feel like a Spider-Man movie, and it's really kind of difficult to sit through. This is by far the most depressing movie I've ever seen, you guys. Save for the beginning and the end, this movie takes on this constant one-note tone of sheer, merciless, unrelenting melodrama and hopelessness. I thought the movie The Road was depressing as fuck. Spider-Man Lotus makes that movie look like a Nick Jr. cartoon. God, what is happening to me? What did the Abyss do to me? Why do I feel this?
That's right. Now I'm rebuilding Normie's timeline as fast as I can so he can review Far From Home next.
We'll deal with that later. The acting in this movie, I'll admit, isn't too bad. You can tell that the main cast especially is giving it their best with what they're given, but the problem is the script plays both to the actors' strengths as well as their weaknesses. So for that reason, nobody in particular really stood out in my opinion. When the scenes require the actors to cry or to get angry or to yell, they all for the most part give pretty convincing performances. Two moments that really stand out for me are a scene in a car between Mary Jane and Harry, as well as the final scene between Peter and the little boy. It's the more subtle, less intense moments of the film where the acting starts to get a little hammy. When the characters are supposed to have banter and be having fun together, that's when the acting gets stale really fast. The lead actor in particular is very wooden and stoic and didn't sell me at all during these scenes. In fact, out of all the actors in this movie, he's the one I would point out as the worst of the bunch. And not just for the obvious real-world reasons. It also doesn't help that the script is just written horrendously. As I said before, the pacing is droning and the tone is just constant, unending feeling of sadness. What's worse is that there isn't really even that much going on in this story. This 2-hour runtime could have easily been chopped down to a 45-minute short film at the most. Half of this movie plays out in the form of flashbacks, and if you've seen my review of The Last of Us Part 2, you know how I feel about relying too much on flashbacks telling your story. Basically, the same mistake is made here. The fact that such a large portion of the story takes place through flashbacks ruins the pacing, takes away all of the story's suspense and tension, and serves basically no purpose except exposition. The flashbacks are also repetitive as fuck. They seem to give us the same information over and over again, which leads me to believe that they were just trying really hard to make this a feature-length film without actually putting in any of the work. It also has a shit ton of filler. There's literally an entire scene where two characters do nothing except talk about how great Peter is, and Peter's such a great guy, and he has all this potential, and he's so perfect, and he's gonna be handsome and smart and have all this great things happening in his life, and we love him, and we're so happy to be his friends, and he's such a good guy. Okay, don't get angry, just think about how stupid the Green Goblin's costume looks. It looks so stupid. But the biggest misstep is really with the characterization. The characters in this movie all make choices and have character arcs that make no sense for who they are. Early on in the film, Peter is standing at Gwen's grave, and Mary Jane has the audacity to ask Peter to come with them to a party, because clearly, when you're in grief, the thing everybody's in the mood for is a big party, and somehow this kicks off Mary Jane's arc where she's complaining that nobody ever gives her attention. It makes her extremely unlikable as a character that Peter lost Gwen and Harry lost his father, and as these two guys are both spiraling into their grief, Mary Jane still wants to make everything about her. I found her extremely obnoxious. Yet even despite all this, Peter seems to be the biggest asshole of them all. He berates her for being so insensitive and somehow actually manages to go further than she does?
You're a joke.
What?
I knew you couldn't handle it.
Couldn't handle what?
Not being the center of attention just for a second. The life of the party loses her spotlight and doesn't know what to do with herself.
That's not true.
It is true. You're so unaware of yourself, it's not even funny. You don't care about people like me and Gwen. She didn't live life like it was a constant game. Maybe if you took a second to think, you could have learned a thing or two from her.
Which brings me to my next topic. The biggest missteps in characterization are actually with Spider-Man and Peter Parker. This movie tries so hard to be different that it ends up betraying the essence of everything Spider-Man and Peter Parker are. Even in the Shocker fight scene, Spider-Man uses Shocker's henchmen as human shields, which is something that a superhero known for pulling his punches would never do. The fights are choreographed okay. I mean, they're not terrible, but they're not great either. The cinematography is too tight, you can't really see any of the stunt work because the angles are too close. Even the fight banter is stilted and cliche, and very unfunny. The Tobey Maguire movies had better fight banter than this, and there hardly even was any.
What are you doing up there?
Staying away from you.
That's a cute outfit. Did your husband give it to you?
Now compare that to Spider-Man Lotus, the difference is night and day.
Okay. If you don't want to do dinner, there's always karaoke night.
Oh yeah, that's funny. Yeah, that's real funny. Do you ever stop talking?
Okay, no karaoke. I didn't want you there anyway.
Enough with the karaoke. As soon as you stop hiding, I'm gonna make sure nobody has to listen to you ever again.
Oh, sure. I've actually got some stand-up shows this week, but, you're not invited.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
I keep coming back to the comparisons between mainstream Spider-Man movies and Spider-Man Lotus. I know, but again, this is what they wanted. They wanted to be compared to these movies. Peter at one point lashes out at Harry for not attending Gwen's funeral until Harry reminds him, hey jackass, I lost my dad and I've been depressed and unable to support anyone besides myself, so of course I didn't go. Now I can understand that in his grief, Peter may have downplayed Harry's emotions in his mind as less important than his own, but it doesn't play that way in the film, and for that reason it kind of makes Peter even more of a dick. But by far the biggest crime that this movie commits in terms of misrepresenting Peter and Spider-Man is the way it treats Spider-Man's relationship with the little boy. And this is actually for two reasons. First of all, Spider-Man shows up to this kid's place and about an hour into their interaction, trauma dumps his guilt and self-loathing onto Timmy, thinking that this child, who by the way is terminally ill, would be better off knowing that his hero's a fraud and a loser, which is apparently exactly what he needs. He needs the one person he looks up to crush what little hope and joy is left in this kid's life at this stage of his illness. Because that's what heroes do, I guess. Holy shit, this movie sucks. Even on its surface, this is a terrible subplot that is unnerving and infuriating to even sit through. Basically everything about the way they handled it sucks. The way Peter just completely overdid it and unloaded this unwarranted anger and sadness onto this terminally ill child. One more time for the people in the back. Terminally ill child. The way he just expects Tim to understand how he feels and just be ready to cope with this too. It makes an already unlikable character that much more insufferable. And I didn't even think that that was possible at this point in the movie. You know, at least on The Boys, they played A-Train's social ineptitude for humor. God, I wish I was watching The Boys right now.
Like, I tell you what, you get better and I'll teach you to run as fast as me.
Yeah?
Yeah?
You'll teach me to outrun cancer?
But in the context of characterization, Peter beating himself up to the point where he tells others how to feel about him is a prime example of how these filmmakers completely missed the mark with the Spider-Man character. Spider-Man by nature is someone who never tells others how to feel about him and always tries to do his best by them, whether they appreciate it or not. We've seen it time and time again. Spider-Man is constantly labeled as a menace by J. Jonah Jameson and never fully appreciated for his efforts, but carries on nonetheless because he knows it's the right thing to do. There are times when the weight of his failures gets to him, but he still would rather choose to shoulder that weight all by himself rather than accuse and berate others for believing in him. And he certainly would never choose to project his failures onto a dying child. The only time in his life that Peter would actually do something like this is at a point in his life before he fully becomes Spider-Man. That is, before his Uncle Ben died, which we've already established at this point in this movie's timeline is something that already happened. And it's a moment that this movie retreads once again in the same way we've seen 1,000 times already. Jesus Christ. This movie retold the story of Uncle Ben again. They actually made us sit through that one more time. These guys didn't know what the fuck they were doing. That's right, Spider-Man fans. You want to see a new and different version of the character? You want to see a darker, grittier version of Spider-Man? One that's made by indie filmmakers? Financed entirely by crowdfunding and makes the MCU look cheap and stupid? Well, that's too bad. Here's Uncle Ben dying again. That's right. When this movie runs out of grief to pile onto Peter's conscience, we are forced to beat this dead horse once again. Literally the one thing that every Spider-Man fan is sick and tired of at this point, and this fan film, which sets out to subvert expectations and deliver an entirely new experience, gives us the same thing we've already seen in 2 other Spider-Man films. Even if you try to justify it as a faithful adaptation of the comics, you can't escape it. This scene still comes across as a forced retread of something that's practically common knowledge at this point. But what the people behind this movie don't seem to understand is that sometimes making changes in an adaptation can actually be a good thing, because you avoid things like being too similar and not having your own identity as an adaptation. For fuck's sake, once was good enough. Stop showing us the same thing over and over again. You know, like the MCU did. Jesus fucking Christ. Holy shit, Green Goblin's costume. Overall, guys, Spider-Man Lotus is not a well-made fan film. It's hard to even consider it a competently made film. Despite the actors' best efforts, the performances are lackluster with only a few good moments here and there. The directing is all over the place, the production design is mid at best, and the script may as well have been written in crayon. It's a movie that doesn't understand Spider-Man and fails at telling a good Spider-Man story in ways that other Spider-Man films have long outgrown. In fact, the only thing that sets this movie apart from other Spider-Man films is how bad it is, because this may be the worst one I have ever seen, and that's saying a lot. Is it any wonder why people are hating on this film so much? Because honestly, even for a fan film, this movie has every reason to deserve all the hate that it's getting. And I hate myself for watching it. Whoa. What the? That was not me. I would never say that. What's happening? What's going on?
And because Normie has been erased from existence, the review is going to have to come from you. Want the spotlight? Here you go.
No. I think I figured it out. I'm just an illusion. Diego isn't writing this review, it's...
God, this non-existent coffee is amazing.